Okay, Dr. Radhika, are you hearing my voice? Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. We can
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
you, sir.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
sure. Okay. Okay, guys, we will be starting our introduction to the physiology. Okay, that is general physiology. So we'll be taking today part of the general physiology. Okay, so as this is an introduction class, we will see most of the topics which are very important from the examination point of view, and which are the most neglected part actually. The people usually skip these things and do not concentrate on the questions that have been asked, and they feel it is a difficult one because they do not need this basic first or two topics of this general physiology. Okay, it is just continuation of your plus two, and you should have that background knowledge. Okay, so we will slowly start and let other people also join. Okay, so coming to the body composition. Okay, the human body composition, it is a well organized structure, we can say. Okay, cells make up making the tissues making the organ and the organ system. Okay, so coming to the basic composition of our body. Okay, what are the things that are present? Okay, so if you take our whole body, so weight, if you take the whole body weight, okay, so 18%, okay, it is the 18% which is made up of protein. Okay, which is made up of protein. This is 18% of our body weight is the protein. Okay, 7% is the trace minerals. Okay, minerals, that is the 7%, and 15% is the fat component. Okay, 15% is the fat component. So 18% is protein, 7% is minerals, and 15% is the fat. So usually in the DMB exams, you can expect memory-based questions usually. So they'll be giving numbers. Okay, so you should know these incorrect. This is the values taken from the genome itself. So 18% protein, 7% minerals, and 15% fat, and the remaining 60% is the water. So which is the major component of our human body. It is the 60% that is composed of water. Okay, the remaining 60% is the water. Okay, in this 60%, if we again divide, so the 40% is occupying the intracellular compartment, ICF. Okay, 40% is in the intracellular, inside the cell, and remaining 20% is the extracellular. Okay, remaining 20% is the extracellular fluid compartment. Extracellular fluid compartment. So this division is very important. So many times the question have been asked regarding this distribution. Okay, the total 60% of the water which is present in human body, 40% is present inside the intracellular compartment, and remaining 20% is present in the extracellular compartment. Okay, is it clear? Very clear, the composition as a whole. So 60% is water, 2/3 is water. So even if you take the earth, okay, whole earth, so 2/3 is the sea water. So this is how the evolution actually evolved, and the same composition is continuing in our body as well. Okay, it is the evolutionary aspect. Okay, that is 2/3 by the water, nearly 60%. Okay, now coming to the extracellular component. Okay, in the extracellular, again, if you take that whatever 20% is there in the extracellular component, in that again 25% of it. Okay, 25% of the extracellular compartment, that is the your vascular system. It It is the vascular system, that is comprising of the 25% of the ECF compartment. 25% of the ECF compartment is present in the vascular system. And if you take the body weight of this, okay, that is plasma, mainly the plasma which is present in the vascular system, it comprises of 5% of the body weight. If you take total body weight, 5% is your plasma. Okay, so n number of times this question has been asked. What is the percentage of body weight the plasma is contributing? Okay, it is the 5%. Okay, now we saw that 25% of the ECF is in the vascular system and remaining 75% of the ECF. Remaining 75% of the ECF is present outside the blood vessels. That is mainly in the interstitial space. Okay, interstitial space. Okay, that is contributing to 15% of the body weight. Okay, 15% of the body weight, that is the interstitial fluids. Did you follow this clearly? The division? Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sir, yes, 25% of the ECF is in vascular system and remaining 75% is outside the blood vessels, that is the interstitial compartment. And coming to the body weight, plasma, this is n number of, it is repeated, 5% of the body weight is your plasma and interstitial fluid is 15% of the body weight, 50% of the body weight. Okay. Next, coming to the now total blood volume. Okay, total blood volume is 8% of the body weight. So here don't get confused. The plasma is only 5%, but the total blood volume, which also includes your blood cells, RBCs, WBCs, all your proteins, everything, whatever is there in the blood. Okay, the total blood volume is 8% of the body weight. Plasma is only 5%, but if you take total blood, it is 8% of the body weight. It is 8% of the body weight. Did you follow this clearly? So no confusion. So easy questions, you will easily miss out if you don't know the exact. These are all just memory based questions. N number of times it is repeated. Plasma is 5% of the body weight. Total blood volume is 8% of the body weight. Okay. Shall I continue? Did you follow this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay,
Sir, in
fine.
that 8%, we should also include plasma also, no?
Yeah, this plasma plus the cellular components. That is 5 plus remaining 3%. 5% is plasma anyway. And remaining contents in the blood, okay, that total together 8%.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So make it clear. 5% is plasma. Remaining all together 8% in the blood compartment. That is blood volume. Total blood volume. Okay. Now coming in a small flowchart. How to remember this? Okay. So now we saw that 60% is the fluid compartment. That is the water content is 60% of the body weight. In our body, the total volume, that is the fluid that is present, is 42 liters. So this also has been asked n number of times. In terms of percentage, it is 60%. If you come in terms of liters, there is roughly 42 liters of water, okay, fluid present in our body. So now you divide, okay. Now out of this 42 liters, now tell me how much is in the intracellular? Previous slide. How much was in the intracellular compartment?
40.
40%.
40%. So 40% of 42 is 28 liters. Okay, and remaining how much?
20.
How much in the extracellular compartment of the total volume?
20%.
20%.
Yeah, 20%. So remember this, 20%. Okay, 20%. That is 14 liters is present in the extracellular compartment. Out of this 14 liters, again we saw that how much is present in plasma? That is intravascular within the blood compartment. How much percentage?
5.
Look here, 25%.
Plasma.
25%
Plasma
is
5.
present.
Plasma 25.
5%.
Say, don't confuse. 25% of the extracellular compartment. That is 25% of this 14 is 3 liters. Okay. Remaining 75% is in the extracellular. That is, sorry, outside the vascular system, interstitial. Okay, interstitial. Again, if you correctly divide this extravascular, okay, interstitial is 10.5 and the transcellular is 0.5. Transcellular is 0.5. So in the earlier slide, you were seeing in terms of percentage. Now, out of this 42 liters, you need to divide it. Okay, 28 liters in the intracellular, 14 in the extracellular. Again, out of this 14 liters, 11 in the extravascular and 3 in the intravascular. That is in the form of plasma. So, what is the body weight? Plasma body weight. In terms of body weight, plasma how much?
5%.
Yeah, 5%. Is it clear, guys? Is the concept clear?
Yes, sir.
So the same question can be twisted and asked n number of times. If you go through the question papers, the same thing has been asked repeatedly. Okay, just the memory-based questions. Okay, so you should know this. 42 liters is our total body volume. In that, 28 liters is inside the cellular compartment. Outside that is ECF. That is 14 liters. Again, in that 3 liters is the plasma. Remaining is the extravascular. In that, if you again divide this 11 liters. 10.5 is the interstitial and transcellular is 0.5 liters. Okay, is it clear? Shall we proceed?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now, same thing. Okay, this diagram is taken from your genome textbook. I think if you go through the answers which are there in your various textbooks of the entrance, okay, you will see this diagram. Okay. The same thing which we explained in the previous slide, same thing. You can see a plasma, 5% of the body weight. Okay, 5% of the body weight. Interstitial fluid is 15% of the body. Same questions have been repeated so many times. Plasma is 5%, interstitial is 15% of the body weight. Okay, and this together, blood plasma and interstitial, that is the 20% of the body weight. Okay, that is in the extracellular compartment. And intracellular compartment, it is the 40% of the body weight. So 40 plus 20, 60% of the body weight is by your fluids. It's through the fluids. So it's all fluids. They either come to the body via your GIT, that is the stomach, means mouth, stomach, or through the lungs via respiration. Some of the fluids they come and exit via the lungs. Okay, fluids, because humidification of the air occurs. So during humidification, there is some exchange of fluids. Okay, lungs and the GIT coming and going out. And the fluid which is getting exchanged and excreted out is through intestine. That is again the GIT. Also, some of the fluids is excreted out through the skin, and major is the kidney, which is excreting, concentrating, and excreting the fluids. Okay, this one diagram which is taken from the genome. Okay, it is the nutshell of whatever we discussed. Did you follow this, guys? Did you understand this diagram? So just by revising this one diagram, we can just memorize the whole thing of the fluid compartment here. And this is another diagram taken from the genome. You can see that this is intracellular compartment. This is extracellular compartment. Again, in the extracellular compartment, it is the vascular, and this is the interstitial. Okay, same thing is given in the genome. So you can see the 40% and 20% in the ECF. 40% in the ICF, 20% in the ECF. Did you follow the diagrams? Okay. Sometimes these diagrams can be just for quick revision in the last moment. Okay, that time you need not again go through all the points. Okay, just looking at this, you have to revise the points. Shall we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Now coming to the electrolytes which are present in this extracellular and the intracellular fluid. So you need to have a thorough knowledge about which are the electrolytes. Okay, present in the ECF and ICF. Now, as you know that, which is the major cation that is present in the extracellular compartment? It is the sodium. It is the sodium.
Sodium.
Which is the major cation present in ICF? It is the
Potassium.
It is the potassium. It is the potassium. Okay. All other are minor cations. And coming to the anions, negatively charged electrolytes, which is the major extracellular anion?
Chloride.
Chloride. So these are all the memory-based questions. So many times these questions have been repeated. So read the question properly, whether they are asking cation or anion. Again, read the next part of the question, whether it is the ECF or the ICF? Which compartment the examiner is asking you? Okay, whether it is the ECF or the ICF. Okay, read it properly and answer accordingly. Okay, and you can see anion. In the again anion, which is the major which is present in the intracellular fluid, is mainly the phosphates. Okay, negatively charged phosphates which are majorly present inside the intracellular fluid. So these are all the basic things that you should know before you go to understand the resting membrane potential and other things. Okay, now we remember major cation in the ECF is sodium, major cation in the ICF is potassium, major anion in the ECF is chloride, major anion which is present in the ICF is your phosphates. Okay, phosphates. Did you follow this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Did you understand?
Yes, sir.
So, what is the unit for this? All these electrolytes? Can you tell me?
Milli equivalents per liter.
Yes, it is the milliequivalents per liter of water. Okay, so units also very important. So, what happens? There will be numbers which will be close by in the options, but there will be some mischievous thing they will be giving in the units. So, please see the units properly and answer. Okay, see the units properly and answer, because next slide we are going to see various units for various things. Okay, so here the electrolytes are milliequivalents per liter. Okay, per liter. Now coming to the units of measuring the concentration of the various solutes in our body. So this is very important. So major thing which we miss in the exams are looking at the units, which we usually lose the answers. Okay, coming to the unit. So the number of molecules. Okay, number of molecules. We express solutes either in molecules or electrical charges or the particles. Okay, the number of molecules, electrical charges or the particles of a substance per unit volume of a particular body is often more meaningful than just weight of the substance. So we always refer to the molecules, electrical charges or particles, that is more meaningful. Okay, we'll come to know why it is more meaningful in coming slides. Okay, now we express all these molecules, electrical charges or particles in terms of moles. Okay, moles. So what is mole? So sometimes this can be a direct question. Okay, for the memory based. So definition of mole. Mole is the gram molecular weight of a substance. Mole is nothing but it is the gram molecular weight of the substance, or we can say molecular weight of the substance in terms of grams. Okay, that is mole. That is the definition. Okay, and each mole consists of 6 into 10 to the power of 23. What is this number? Can anybody tell? Remember this? What is this number?
Avogadro's number.
Yeah, it is the Avogadro number of molecules that is present in each mole of any solute. Okay, and 1 millimole is equal to 1 by 1000 of the each mole. So in our body, we usually express in terms of millimoles. Okay, we express in terms of millimoles. Okay, millimoles. Now coming to an example. So most common electrolytes, you know, now it is sodium and chloride. Okay, NaCl. So 1 mole of NaCl. So what does it give the meaning? So whenever, so this can be a direct question asked again. So I think once it is repeated, okay, in one of the DNB exam, NaCl. So you should know a rough molecular weight. Na means sodium 23 grams and chloride 35.5 grams. So if you add, it comes to around 58.5 grams. So this 58.5 grams means 1 mole. Okay, then what is millimole? If 1 mole is 58.5 grams, then 1 millimole is equal to 58.5 milligrams. So see the units properly. So this can be simple question asked in the exam just to test your basic knowledge. Okay, so 1 mole of sodium chloride is 58.5 grams, then 1 millimole is equal to 58.5 milligrams. Did you understand this?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So these are the examples that I have directly taken from Ganom itself, because the same thing have been repeated so many times in the entrance. Okay, just remember this: 1 mole of NaCl. So same example is given in one of the entrance tests. Okay, so 1 mole is 58.5 grams, grams and 1 millimole is in milligrams. Okay, so here you have to take a molecular weight of each of the ion. So solute. Okay, here. Okay, so shall we proceed now? Did you understand mole? So we express in terms of millimole in our body. Okay, it is the millimole which we usually express the concentration of the solutes. Okay, now coming to the one more concept, same taken from your Gannon. Okay, so the molecular weight of the substance. The molecular weight of the substance. What do you mean by molecular weight of the substance? So this can be given in permutation combination and ask which of the following is correct. Like that, they can give 4 sentences. Okay, they will give a haphazard one. So you should know the correct definition. This once I think it is asked. The molecular weight of the substance is the ratio. First thing you should note down, it is the ratio. What is that ratio? It is the ratio of mass of one molecule of that substance to the mass of 1/12 the mass of an carbon-12 atom. It is the ratio. Okay, molecular weight of that substance divided by the 1/12 the mass of the C12 carbon-12. So this is the ratio. We are taking the ratio. This by this. So this is called as molecular weight of a substance X. If you take X, it is the molecular. So it is the mass of the one molecule of X divided by the mass of the 1/12 the mass of the carbon atom. Did you get this? What is this? Understood? This is the ratio. If it is a ratio, does it have any units?
No, sir.
So it is it should be a dimensionless. So it is a dimensionless. Okay, since it is dimensionless, but since we are expressing carbon-12 in some units, okay, so we'll come to that now next. So Dalton, okay, Dalton is the unit which is equal to the mass of the 1/12 the mass of an atom of the carbon-12. Okay, so even though it is dimensionless, but the molecules which we are expressing is in kilodalton, Daltons only. Okay, in terms of Dalton, kilodalton means 1000 Dalton. Okay, it is expressed like that usually, but usually it is dimensionless. But for the sake that is already been developed, okay, now we are using Daltons or kilodaltons. Usually in proteins, okay, they will be having more mass. Proteins will be having more mass. Usually we are expressing the mass of the proteins in terms of kilodaltons, 1000 kilodaltons. Okay, so here in this whole discussion, we should know the correct definition of the molecular weight of a substance. Okay, so you should remember this carbon-12, 1/12 the mass of this one. Okay, so ratio, it is a dimensional, but still we express in terms of Dalton. Did you follow this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Have understood? Okay, fine. Next, we will go to the equivalents. Next, one more unit for expressing the electrolytes or the solutes in our body. That is the equivalents. Okay. Now, one equivalent is 1 mole of an ionized substances. Okay. What is one equivalent? It is nothing but 1 mole of an ionized substance divided by its valence. You know what is valence? What is the valence of sodium?
11.
1.
1.
Yes, you remember physics now. Valence. Now, what is the valence of calcium ion?
2.
2, sir.
Okay, fine. What is the valence of bicarbonate ion? Bicarbonate ion.
1.
1.
1. 1.
1. So these are all simple questions that have already been asked. Okay, it is just to test your patience. That's all. You know the things, you need to answer it correctly. Now, 1 mole of sodium chloride. Now I am taking 1 mole of sodium chloride. Now we have seen the definition. It is ionized substance. Okay. Now this NaCl, when it goes into our body, it immediately gets ionized into sodium and chloride. Okay. 1 equivalent of sodium and 1 equivalent of chloride. Did you understand this? So 1 mole of sodium which you are eating in the form of salt, okay, NaCl, when it goes into our body fluid compartment, it immediately dissociates into 1 equivalent of sodium and 1 equivalent of chloride. Okay, 1 equivalent of chloride. Now you know what is the molecular weight of the sodium? 23 grams.
23.
So 1 equivalent of sodium is how much? 23 grams. Okay. Now, but what I told, it should be divided by its valence. It has to be. So now you divide this by its valence. What is the valence? 1. So what is the answer? What is the answer?
23.
23 grams.
23. Now I will come to one more example. Now you come to the one more example. Now take calcium. So one equivalent of calcium is 40 grams divided by its valence. So what is the one equivalent of calcium? 20 grams.
20 grams.
Suppose in the question what they will give you, they will do a tricky question. Now they will tell the molecular weight of calcium is 40 grams. What is one equivalent of calcium? This will be a simple question and your answers will be 10, 20, 30, 40. So which one will you take?
20.
20. So if you know the definition, if you know its valence, then you can easily answer. Is it a simple question or it is long?
Simple ones.
It is simple, provided you know the concept and it is the definition of the equivalent, and you should know the valency of it. Okay, then it will be very easy to answer.
Simple ones.
Yeah. So next coming to milli equivalent. So what is milli equivalent? 1000, 1 divided by 1000 of an equivalent. So in our body, we are mainly expressing the concentrations in milli equivalents. So what is the concentration of sodium in the extracellular compartment now?
142 milli equivalent.
Yes. Now you get the concept, isn't it? So we are expressing here. So it is ionized solute in our body. Therefore, we need to express sodium not in terms of grams, but we need to express in terms of milli equivalents. It is getting ionized. Also, it is having some valency. All these things will come into picture, and ultimately, it gets its unit like this. I've understood the importance of units, how they are getting. Okay, fine. Next, coming to one more concept. Okay, normality. Okay, already you know all these things were there in your +2. Okay, normality. Normality of a solution is the number of gram equivalents in 1 liter of the solution. In 1 liter, how many gram equivalents are present? That is the normality. Okay, that is the normality. Okay, so once this question was asked, so one normal solution of hydrochloric acid is how much? Okay, now you should know the molecular weights. Okay, H plus. Okay, so HCl immediately dissociates into H plus and Cl minus. Okay, now HCl means you have to add 1 plus 35.5. So total it is 36.5, and this should be dissolved in in 1 liter of the solution. That is 36.5 grams per liter. This is equal to one normality. Okay, one normality of HCl is nothing but 36.5 grams of HCl per liter. Did you understand this normality concept?
Yes, sir.
So this one time this question has been asked. So only I have included this sentence. But this is also from Genome. Okay, this is also from Genome. So one normality means it is the number of gram equivalents present in 1 liter of the solution. 1 liter of the solution. Okay. Next, coming to the measurement of the body fluid volumes. Now, how we are going to measure the body fluid volumes? Okay. Once not. The recent AIIMS. Have you read? Anybody has read the recent AIIMS question paper? Have solved? So this question was there. So measurement of the body. So this many times it has been asked. So last paper AIIMS, this question was there. Now we'll come. What is this? Okay. So we are using indicator dilution method. We are using a dye. We are going to inject a dye into the fluid compartment, and we are going to measure its volume. Okay. Here the formula given is, please note down, volume is equal to A1 minus A2 divided by C. Okay, A1 minus A2 divided by C. So what are these? V is the volume of distribution of that dye which we inject. The volume of the compartment, volume of distribution. A1 is amount of dye that we inject initially. The dye injected is A1. A2 is the amount of dye that is excreted or metabolized. A2 is either excreted out of the kidney or intestine, or it is metabolized. and C is for concentration of the dye in the fluid. So if you know these things, if you know A1, if you know A2, and if you know the concentration, you can easily calculate the volume of the compartment we are going to measure. Okay, so one example I will give so that you can understand this formula. Okay, so this was asked in the recent aims. Okay, so find out the volume of ECF, extracellular compartment. So the dye used is sucrose. So we are going to give sucrose. Okay, initially we gave sucrose 150 mg. 150 mg of sucrose was injected into the ECF compartment, and A2, okay, it is the amount of the sucrose that is excreted or metabolized, A2. Okay, now and the concentration that was achieved after some time was 0.01 mg per ml. Now can you calculate? Please calculate, tell me the volume of the ECF from these three values. Calculate, tell me fast. Put this into these values into this columns and tell me what is the volume of the ECF in this case, sucrose.
1400.
1400.
What
14.
tell always. I want in units. What 1400 kg?
1400 milligrams.
mg per ml.
Milligrams per milliliter, sir.
mg per ml. Sir.
No, not mg per ml. No, wrong. See, in the numerator you are having mg. This minus this. In the denominator you are having mg ml. So mg will get cancelled. Ml will go to the numerator.
Per ml. Sir.
Yes.
Huh? 1400 ml.
Ml.
What is
Ml, sir.
1400 ml in terms of liters?
14 liters. Sir.
14
1.4 liters. Sir.
1.4.
Sorry, 1.4.
1.4 liters.
1.4 liter.
You're done.
14.
You've done the wrong calculation, guys. You've missed 1 0 somewhere. Say 150 minus 10 divided by 0.01. So 140 divided by. Okay. So it comes to around 14,000 ml. Okay, 14. So this example is directly from the Ganon. Okay, is it correct? See 140. Okay. After that, 2 decimals. Put 2 zeros. Is it correct?
Yes.
14,
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
14,000 ml is nothing but 14 liters. So in the first example where we saw what was the ECF volume out of total 42 liters? 14 liters.
14 liters. Sir.
Yeah. So this is how we are going to use a dye and note the initial dose given and the dose that is being excreted. And if you know the concentration, you can easily calculate the volume. So volume present in the ECF. Did you understand this example, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And in the recent aims, they had given one example with the help of urea. Okay, urea was given, and the same has been asked. Okay, 10% is metabolized, like that they give. Okay, 10% is metabolized. So what is your answer? Something was there. Okay, so they gave in terms of percentage, but the formula remains the same. Okay, formula they gave some concentration. Okay, and the formula remains the same, and the answer was same. 14 liters was the answer in that. Okay, 13.9 and something was there. So the same question has been repeated in the last aims. Did you understand this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is it clear? Is it clear? So there is a short question from this topic of general physiology. Okay, usually the neglected part. Okay, though it is very easy. So if you miss 1 0 here, your answer will be wrong because one of the options will be 1.4 liters, and you will end up in losing 1 mark. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
So do it correctly. Okay. Shall we proceed forward? Now, what are the characteristic features of the dye that we are going to inject here? So this is one time it is asked. So it should be non-toxic. It should not be toxic to the person whom we are going to measure, whether it may be an animal or a human being. Okay. It should be non-toxic, and it should mix thoroughly in the compartment that we are going to measure. If you are going to measure ECF, that whatever the substance you are using, it should thoroughly mix in the ECF compartment. And the concentration of the dye should be very easy to measure. So ultimately, what we require is we should be able to measure its concentration in the ECF at the end of the injecting the dye. It should be very easy. It should not be too tough. If it is too tough, means there is no use. We cannot measure. So easy to measure, and it should remain constant. It should not change its forms. Okay, since we are giving various dyes which are having some composition, chemical composition, that should not change from time to time. It should remain constant. Okay, dye should remain constant, and the amount of the dye excreted or metabolized, that also we should be easily to. It should be very easy to determine it. Then only we can put that in the formula. So we should we should be very easily to measure the concentration as well as the amount of the dye excreted. Only such are the ideal features of the ideal characteristic features of the dye that we are going to use. Did you understand this, guys? It should be first is non-toxic. There should not be any toxic anaphylaxis or something like that. It should be non-toxic. Should mix thoroughly. It should mix thoroughly, and it should remain constant. It should not change its chemical composition, and the concentrations, okay, should be very easy to measure. Only such are the features of an ideal dye. Ideal dye. Do you understand this, guys? Shall we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Next, coming to the transport mechanisms. Another favorite, okay, your memory-based questions, okay, or memory-based questions, okay, transport mechanisms across the cell membrane. These things you know, okay, but I'm going to tell the only key features which from the point of your entrance, okay. So, transport, mainly we divide them into passive transport mechanisms and active transport mechanisms. So, there are two transport mechanisms. One is passive and other is the active. Okay. In passive, again we have number one, diffusion, and number two, osmosis. Okay, diffusion and osmosis. They come under passive transport mechanisms. Okay, and in diffusion again you have got simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Okay, this is the classification. In active, we have primary active transport, secondary active transport, carrier mediated, and vesicular transport. Okay, vesicular transport. So this is the broad classification of the transport mechanisms in our body, passive and active. So we will see one by one now. So very quickly. So coming to the, what do you mean by passive and active? Why these names have come? So coming to the passive. So passive means it is occurring along the electrochemical gradient. Okay, from the higher region to the lower region, from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. So therefore, along the concentration gradient, electrochemical gradient, and without the need of the energy, there is no need of ATP. Okay, so this is passive. Okay, and it is along the concentration gradient. Therefore, we call it as downhill movement. Okay, we call it as downhill from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. Okay, from higher region to lower along the concentration gradient. So this is called as passive because there is no need of ATP and it is occurring along the concentration gradient. Okay, coming to the active, it is the transport mechanism which is occurring against the electrochemical gradient. So if it is occurring against the electrochemical gradient, do you require energy or no?
Yes.
Yes,
We
sir.
need energy.
So energy is coming in the form of what? ATP.
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 That is ATP is hydrolyzed to high energy phosphates and ADP, and that high energy phosphate is used for the transport of the solutes against their concentration gradient. Therefore, this is called as uphill movement. Okay, uphill movement of the solutes here. Okay, so did you get the difference between active and passive? Did you follow?
Yes, sir.
Coming to the diffusion. Coming to the diffusion. Okay, what do you mean by diffusion? Okay, the particles, molecules or atoms. Okay, they are dissolved in a solvent. Okay, and when they are dissolved in our body fluids like sodium, which is dissolved in the ECF. Okay, it is in a random movement. It is moving randomly. So this random movement is called as what? Tell me. That was a concept in your plus 2. Random movement of ions, molecules or atoms. What is that movement called as?
Brownian movement.
Yes.
Brownian moment.
This Brownian movement was asked one time in Ames. So this random motion, okay, of the molecules in our body or the any solvent, okay, that is called as random continuous movement. Okay, random continuous movement, and that is called as Brownian movement. So this was once it was asked. Okay, Brownian movement. Okay. Now, diffusion is the process by which any gas, because in our body we are dealing with the gases also, O2, CO2 like that, NO. So it could be either gas or a substance, okay, from one region to another, because they are in random motion, okay, and they fill the all available volume. Okay, so they diffuse from one area to other area because they are in a random motion, and they try to fill the available space wherever possible. Okay, and they always move from a region of high concentration to the area of lower concentration, from higher concentration to lower concentration, always from the region of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. So this total movement of particles, we call it as net flux. Flux of solute particles, that is the flux, total amount of particles, that is called as net flux, that is occurring from the area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. Okay, and the time required for this, okay, for diffusion to reach a point called as equilibrium. What do you mean by equilibrium? Where the concentration of the solutes in two different compartments, they are equal. Okay, that we call the point of equilibrium. Okay, the time required to reach this equilibrium is proportional to the square of the diffusion distance. Diffusion distance. Okay, time required is proportional to the square of the diffusion distance. Suppose if the distance is small, do you require more time or less time to move?
Less time.
Less time. If the distance is more, time required is also more. But here it is the square of the distance. Remember always. So once this was asked, okay, this question was asked. It is the square. Sometimes they will give you directly proportional to the diffusion distance, square, triple, and quadruple. So answer will be your square of the distance. Okay. Time required to reach equilibrium is proportional to the square of the diffusion distance. So this sentence is directly from the Gannon. Once it was asked in DNB exam. Okay, square of the distance, time required to reach equilibrium. Okay, now there is a law called as Fick's law of diffusion. Okay, the diffusion of any solute is governed by a law called as Fick's law of diffusion. Okay, Fick's law of diffusion. So now we will come to know what we mean by Fick's law of diffusion. Okay, the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient. So directly proportional to the concentration gradient. The rate of diffusion, okay, the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient and total surface area that is available for the diffusion, and inversely proportional to the thickness of the membrane, because here the biological membrane is there, the cell membrane. Okay, more the thick, less is the rate of diffusion. So if you put into the formula, the net rate of diffusion, that is J, is equal to dA into delta C divided by T. So what are the things here? It is D is the diffusion coefficient, A is the area available for, or the total surface area available for diffusion. Okay, T is the thickness of the membrane, and delta C is the concentration gradient. Delta C is the concentration gradient. So minus here, it is the minus sign. That this minus sign indicates that the movement is occurring from the region of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. Did you follow this formula? Did you understand the guys? The rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the what?
Concentration gradients.
Concentration gradient, area available for diffusion, and inversely proportional to the thickness of the membrane.
Thickness of the membrane.
And it is given in minus sign. Minus sign denotes that the diffusion is occurring from a region of higher concentration to the lower concentration. Okay, so this is a Fick's law of diffusion. Sometimes this will be given. Okay, and they will tell you 4 options. Many laws are there. One of the answer will be Fick's law. Okay, something like that. They can frame the question, or they can ask directly proportional to this, that, something. So permutation combination, they can use this and ask you the question. Do you understand diffusion Fick's law? Shall we continue?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Now, diffusion is classified again into simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Coming to the simple diffusion, so lipid soluble substances are diffusing through simple mechanism because your cell membrane is lipid bilayer, isn't it? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So lipid soluble substances easily move across the cell membrane. So lipid soluble substances, they go by simple diffusion mechanism. So they easily pass through the membranes. And the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the lipid solubility. More the lipid soluble substance, more is the diffusion. Less is the lipid solubility, less is the rate of diffusion. Okay, which are the examples? You know, most common, your O2 and CO2, which are daily. Okay, each second you are breathing in and out. They are moving out of the in and out of your RBCs. Okay, into your lungs. Okay, alveoli. So these are more lipid soluble. So they easily get exchanged. Even alcohols. Okay, any compound, any molecule which is having a alcohol moiety, they can easily diffuse in and out through the cell membrane. So these are the lipid soluble substances. They are easily getting exchanged in the cell membrane. That is by simple diffusion mechanism. Then what about lipid insoluble substances? They are also having simple diffusion. Lipid insoluble substances are there which are also having simple diffusion mechanism. Okay, they pass through a special channels called as protein channels. Okay, you know that the cell membrane is made up of your integral proteins, peripheral proteins. Do you remember this concept? Yes or no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In the cell membrane, you have got protein channels. So through these protein channels, the lipid insoluble substances move. The lipid soluble directly they exchange via the cell membrane, but lipid insoluble through the protein channels they will get exchanged. And these protein channels are the tubular structures that extend from extracellular part to the intracellular side of the cell membrane. From extracellular to the intracellular. So these are the tubular structures. So they can be either leaky channels or gated channels. So leaky channels means they are open continuously. Always they are open. So they are called as leaky. So through these there will be continuous exchange of the molecules by simple diffusion. Okay, from the area of higher concentration to the area of lower concentration. And some of the protein channels are gated. They are controlled. Okay, they are controlled, gated. Okay, they open and close whenever the signal is there. So signal can be in the form of various types. Okay, the gates are actually gate like extensions of the protein molecules which can close or open according to the ion permeability required. Okay, so these gated can be voltage gated. If there is a change in voltage, these protein channels will open or close accordingly. So they are called as voltage gated channels. Okay, change in the membrane potential will trigger either open or close of the channels. In that way, the exchange of ions or the molecules occur. And gate can be ligand gated. Okay, ligand gated. So whenever a chemical or anything that binds with it, then only there is movement. And there is one more called as mechanosensitive channels. So whenever like stretch, mechanical stretch, whenever there is stretch of the cell membrane, then these protein channels will open or close accordingly. So remember that in this whole thing, the lipid insoluble substances, they are moving in and out with the help of the protein channels. These protein channels are nothing but the tubular structures extending in between your extracellular and intracellular side of the cell membrane. And these tubular structures can be either leaky or gated. Leaky means they are open continuously. Gated means they open and close whenever there is requirement or there is a trigger. What is that trigger? Trigger can be a voltage gated or ligand gated or mechanosensitive. Mechanosensitive means stretch. Did you understand this, guys? In the simple diffusion, the lipid insoluble substances are having these mechanisms, okay, for the movement. Did you follow?
Yes, sir.
Is it fine? Anyone having doubts? You can ask. No need to hurry. Is that fine, guys? Shall I continue?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Next, coming to facilitated diffusion. Okay, so you can see here the tubular structures, proteins. Okay, in facilitated diffusion, they need a carrier protein. Here the molecules require a carrier protein. So this is the carrier protein which is having a binding site. You can see here binding site. Okay, it's having a binding site. So water soluble substances like glucose. So they need a carrier protein. Okay, and those binding these proteins. Okay, which is having a binding protein. They are highly specific. Glucose means only glucose will move in this channel. The galactose cannot move. Okay, the amino acids cannot move. So these are highly specific. Okay, these carrier proteins are highly specific. Okay, and has got a binding site on one side. So whenever it is coming from outside to inside, first it will come here, attach with this, and then it will go inside. So it has got a binding site. And some of the key features of this facilitated diffusion is they are highly specific. As I told, the carrier proteins are highly specific. Glucose means only glucose is getting transported, not the amino acids, not the urea, not the other substances. So they are highly specific. This is the first feature of the facilitated diffusion. Next is saturation. So one cell membrane will be having some n number, like 100. Okay, it will be having n number of protein channels. Only those that much molecules only can move here. So it follows a saturation kinetics. Once all these proteins are saturated, there is no, even though the molecules are waiting here, but they cannot get transported because the number of proteins are already engaged. Therefore, they follow saturation kinetics. And there is a competitive inhibition. That means this binding site, okay, this binding site can have a chemical structure where there are two components. Suppose I'll give one example. There is a galactose, and a glucose. There is a glucose. So two materials are there. These both are having almost similar structure. Okay, only there is one change in the OH. Okay, so almost having the similar structure. They have got similar affinity to this binding site. So now what will happen? Will they compete or no? To get attached to this binding point? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So if there are two molecules having similar structure, they compete for this binding site. So that is called as competitive inhibition. Means if excuse me. So here there is a competition between these two. If one gets attached, other substance gets inhibited for the transport. Therefore, these are the three key features of your facilitated diffusion. Have you understood this? Specificity, saturation, and competitive inhibition. Okay. Shall I continue? Have you understood this?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, fine. So this is the graph. So this is again one of the favorite graph given in the entrance. So you can see here, more the concentration gradient, more is the rate of diffusion. So this is for the simple diffusion, this blue line, simple diffusion. Okay. Whereas your facilitated diffusion, it follows saturation kinetics. So it has got a Vmax. So once all the carrier proteins have been occupied by the substance, so no more substances can be transported. So it reaches a maximum here. So this is the Vmax, velocity maximum. So this is the graph for the facilitated diffusion. Okay, this is the graph for facilitated diffusion. So it will flatten after some time because all the carrier proteins have been bound with the molecule which is getting transported. Did you understand this graph? Is it clear? Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So you need to interact. So coming to the type of the proteins. Okay, in the same, so carriers. So we saw in the facilitated. So in that protein system, we have got three. One is called as unipode. What does it mean? Uni means only one. So this protein molecule, which is present on the cell membrane, can transport only one molecule, one substance. Example is your glucose transporters, GLUT1, GLUT2, GLUT3, all those. Okay, glucose transporters. And one more protein system, that is sympod. What does it mean by sympod? The same protein. So it is having a binding site for two molecules. So two molecules can get attached. One is for
Having the same site.
at the same site, yes, and the same protein, two binding site, one for the sodium, one for the glucose. So sodium glucose importer. So this is present in your kidney cells. Okay, PCT and all. Okay, sympod. And third protein system is the antipode. What is meant by anti?
Like one
Opposite.
substance passes inward and the other
Opposite
is
direction.
outside.
In the sympod, both the substances move in the similar direction. Sympod, same direction. In antipode, it is having the binding site for two substances, but one substance is moving out of the cell and the other is coming inside the cell. Again, this is present in your renal cells, okay, gastric cells. So, best example is sodium hydrogen exchanger, antipode. Okay, sodium, potassium, potassium also is there. Okay, that's also an antipode. Sodium hydrogen exchanger is also an example. Did you understand this, guys?
Yes, sir.
Unipode, sympod, antipode. Okay, you should know a few examples for that. I have given one each, and when you come to the system, you will come to know many of these examples. Okay, so these are the type of carrier protein system in our body. Okay, sympod, unipode, antipode. Okay, next coming to osmosis. Okay, coming to the osmosis. So here, what is happening is in the diffusion, what happened? There was the movement of solutes. Okay, in osmosis, it is the diffusion of the solvent. This is the major difference. Okay, read the question properly. Though it is very easy definition, you will not read it completely and end up in marking the wrong answer. So it is the diffusion of solvent molecules into a region where there is higher solute concentration. So here solvent molecules are moving from a region of lower solute concentration to an area of higher solute concentration. Okay, so this is called as osmosis. Okay, this is called as osmosis. Here the movement of water, that is the solvent molecule, okay, is through a semi-permeable membrane. Remember, this is another important thing you should note down in the definition. That is through a semi-permeable membrane, the solvent molecules are moving, and from the region of lower concentration to the region of higher solute concentration. This lower solute concentration is nothing but lower osmotic pressure to an area of higher osmotic pressure. Okay, this is the definition of osmosis. Okay, through a semi-permeable, the movement of water molecules or the solvent across a semi-permeable membrane from a region of lower solute concentration to an area of higher solute concentration. Did you understand this, guys? So the definition can be a tricky one. They can ask from the lower solute concentration or low osmotic pressure area. Okay, in either way they can twist and test your simple definition. Okay, so this is regarding the definition. Movement of solvent from a region of lower solute concentration to the area of higher solute concentration. Okay, next. So there is a tendency for the movement of solvent molecules to a region with greater solute concentration, and that also can be prevented by applying pressure. If you apply pressure to an area, to the membrane or the site which is having greater solute concentration, you can prevent the movement of the solvent water molecule. Okay, that is called as osmotic pressure. The pressure required to prevent the movement of water molecules or the solvent molecules, that is called as osmotic pressure, and it depends upon the number of the solute particles. This is another important thing, guys. Remember, not the type of the particles. It depends upon the number, quantity. Why? Because you know that PV is equal to nRT divided by V. Okay, P is equal to nRT by. So PV is equal to nRT. What is this equation called as, guys? Remember this guy.
Ideal gas equation.
Yes, ideal gas equation. So just if you rearrange, P is equal to nRT divided by V. Okay. So what is N? N is nothing but the number of particles. Number, not the type. Okay. Number of particles, not the type of the particle. So by this ideal gas equation itself, here osmosis. Okay. The osmotic pressure. So we require the number of particles. Okay. If you held T constant, temperature if you make it constant, now the osmotic pressure P is proportional to the number of the particles per unit volume. Per unit volume, it is the number of the particles that is most important, not rather than the type of the particles. Did you understand this osmotic pressure concept?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So again, the concentration of osmotically active particles here we express in terms of osmoles. So osmotically active. So there are many minerals in our ECF, but all are not required for us. They all are not osmotically active. Only sodium, chloride, calcium, bicarbonates, only few are osmotically important for our body. And they are the one which are determining the various diseases and other things, movement. Okay. Therefore, we express the concentration of these osmotically active particles in terms of osmoles. In terms of osmoles. Okay. Now, 1 osmole is equal to, okay, 1 osmole is equal to gram molecular weight of the substance divided by the number of freely moving particles that will liberate or dissociate in the solution. Suppose you are taking HCl, HCl will immediately get dissociated to H plus and Cl minus. So 1 milliosmole of any substance, that is equal to, or the molecule is equal to gram molecular weight of the substance divided by the number of ions that it liberates, number of particles that is going to get dissociated. So that is called as 1 osmole. 1 osmole. Then what is 1 milliosmole? 1 milliosmole is equal to 1 by 1000 osmole. This is more commonly used in our body, milliosmole. Like your milliequivalent, milliosmole is the unit that is more frequently used in our body. Okay, so this is the concept of osmosis. Osmosis is used for the concentration of osmotically active particles. Osmotically active particles. Okay. Now coming to the one more, this one. Suppose if a solute does not dissociate, does not liberate anything, non-ionizing compound like glucose. Glucose will not dissociate in our blood like sodium chloride or the HCl. Okay. For such substances, the osmotic pressure is the number of glucose present. Okay. Here you have to take the direct number of the glucose molecules because it cannot dissociate. It is non-ionizing compound. Non-ionizing compound. Did you follow this? Glucose, because glucose is very important. Glucose is one of the osmotically active substance, but it cannot dissociate. Therefore, number of glucose molecules matter here. Number of glucose molecules matter here. Okay. And if the solute ionizes, okay, then we get osmotically active particles. Okay, like sodium chloride. Now, sodium chloride, what happens if you put into a solvent or any water? What happens? It immediately dissociates into sodium and chloride ions. And each mole of sodium chloride would have 2 milliosmoles. So NaCl, since it is dissociating into 1 Na and 1 Cl, 1 plus 1, 2 milliosmoles. So NaCl is going to put how much? 2 milliosmoles. What about sodium sulfate? How many?
Sodium.
In sodium sulfate, this will dissociate into how many particles? 2 sodium plus
2
3
sodium
particles.
bisulfite.
plus 1 SO4, isn't it? So total how many? 2 particles and this is 1 particle. So total how many osmotically active particles? Sodium sulfate, totally how many active, osmotically active particles dissociate? 3, isn't it?
3 active.
See, so since it is dissociating into 3 osmotically active particles,
3, sir.
therefore the osmolarity that is exerted is 3 milliosmoles. It is exerting 3 osmoles. 3 osmoles. Okay? Did you understand this concept? So you have to take totally how many number of osmotically active particles this substance is going to liberate. NaCl is liberating 2 osmotically active particles. So therefore it is exerting 2 osmoles. What about calcium chloride, guys? If I give an example of calcium chloride, how much milliosmoles? Calcium chloride
3.
3, because it is going to liberate 1 calcium ion and 2 chloride ions.
2 chloride ions.
So these are the simple questions asked, guys. So you should be very careful in answering. Okay. Next, another concept. Okay, in our body, they will not behave ideally. You will never get an ideal gas, isn't it? You have learned that, isn't it? PV is equal to nRT. Does any gas follow that principle? PV is equal to nRT? No.
No, sir.
No. In the same way, our body fluids are not ideal. They are not ideal solutions. Okay? They are not ideal body. They will not follow the kinetics that is there theoretically. Practically, they are different. Although the dissociation of the strong electrolytes is complete, even though, suppose you take NaCl in our ECF, even though it is a strong electrolyte, they will dissociate completely, but they will not exert full osmotic effect. When you take, it will not exert fully 2 it cannot exert in our body, but it will be less than that. So actually, the effective concentration of in our body fluids rather than the number of milliequivalents of the electrolyte shown in the osmotic capacity. That means in reality, the effective concentration, effective activity is not 2 milliosmoles here. Okay, the NaCl, the effective concentration or activity in our body, it is not 2 milliosmoles. It is just less than 2 milliosmoles. Okay, it is less than 2 milliosmoles. So that therefore 1 millimole of Na sodium chloride per liter in our body contributes to less than 2 milliosmoles. Okay, it contributes to less than 2 milliosmoles of osmotically active particles per liter. Did you understand this, guys? So theoretically, what we say that NaCl is going to exert 2 osmoles or 2 milliosmoles in our body. But if you measure exactly in our body, it is less than the 2 milliosmoles. It is less than because of the difference in the body fluid. Okay, because there is continuous interaction between the particles. Sodium chloride, once you put inside in our body fluid, it will not just stay as Na and Cl. There will be interaction between other molecules as well. Therefore, if you take the net effective concentration or the net effective activity, okay, if you take the net effective activity, where is this cursor? Okay, net effective activity, it is less than the ideal one. Less than the ideal. Did you understand this concept, guys? Okay, did you follow this? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this effective activity of various solutes, that is the one which is determining the osmotic capacity of various fluid compartments in our body. Okay, this effective activity is the one which is determining the osmotic capacity in our body. Okay. So coming to the one more concept. So we know that osmotically active solutes are there in our body fluids, ECF, ICF, other things. So these solutes or the electrolytes are expressed in terms of osmoles per liter. Okay, when you express osmoles per liter, then we call it as osmolarity. Osmolarity. So what is the osmolarity of the plasma? We say it is nothing but the number of osmoles When we speak number of osmoles, it includes osmotically active solutes that are present per liter. That is called as osmolarity. Then there is one more word called as osmolality. There it is R, it is L. Osmolality is number of osmoles per kilogram of the solvent. Here per liter of the solvent. Did you understand the difference, guys? Osmolarity and osmolality. So most frequently asked, one of the favorite DLB question. Okay. So per liter. So how to remember this? When you are expressing per liter, it is osmolarity, R for R. When you tell osmoles per kilogram L, it is osmolality. Did you understand this, guys? Difference? When you're
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yes, when you're expressing the osmoles per liter, it is osmolarity. When you're expressing the osmoles per kilo, then it is osmolality. Okay, simple. Okay, therefore, your osmolarity is affected by the volume of the various solutes in the source. So we have got ICF, we have got ECF, and the temperature is varying in different compartments. All these things are going to affect. Okay, all these things are going to affect your osmolarity. Okay, whereas your osmolality is not affected by your temperature, your volume, because you are taking per kilogram of the solvent per kilogram. So these things are not going to affect. Okay. So osmotically active substances in our body are dissolved in water, and the density of water is 1. Okay. So the osmolar concentration can be expressed as osmoles per liter of water. Since the density of water is 1, we can easily express, okay, osmoles per liter. For 1 liter, how many osmoles are there? So we express in terms of osmoles, or we can take milliosmoles depending upon the number, either osmoles or milliosmoles per liter. Okay. Now, did you understand, guys, this much? Osmolality, and the factors affecting the osmolarity, temperature and the various volume compartments. And usually we express osmoles per liter. Whenever we are talking in our body, human body, always we use osmoles per liter or milliosmoles per liter. Have you understood till now, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now coming to how to calculate the total osmolarity of our fluid, plasma. So this is the most important equation that is being asked n number of times. Osmolarity of our plasma is equal to 2 times the sodium concentration, 0.055 times the glucose, and 0.36 times the bun. Okay, blood, urine, nitrogen. So this will give you the total osmolarity. So what is the normal osmolarity? Can you tell me, guys? What is the osmolarity of our plasma? How much it is? Does anyone remember? It is 290 milliosmoles per liter. This is also n number of times it is asked. Normal osmolarity of our plasma is 290 milliosmoles per liter. Okay, what is the formula? 2 times the sodium, 0.055 times the glucose, plus 0.36 the one value. Okay, did you follow? Are you following, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now we are coming to another term that is called as tonicity. So we are having two compartments. One is plasma and other is the reference one. So we want to see whether the number of particles present in this reference, whether they are equal to the plasma or not. So plasma is having how much osmolarity? 290, isn't it? 290 milliosmoles. If this another solution, say for example X, is having again 290 milliosmoles as the osmolarity. Whether it is equal or different now. Whether this is plasma, this is plasma, this is X. This plasma and X having 290. Are they same in the same osmolarity or no? Having same osmolarity or no? Answer yes or no? So always we use a relative terminologies here. Okay. Now we will come to know what it is now. So you get the answer. So solutions whose osmolarity is same as the plasma, we call them as isotonic solutions. Any solution, okay, for example, 0.9% of NaCl, your saline, normal saline, which are going to infuse to the patients, or 5% glucose, which are normally giving in the your wards. Okay, these are having same osmolarity, which is compared to the our plasma, that is 290 milliosmoles per liter. So these two are said to be isotonic. Any solvent which is having greater osmolarity than the plasma, then we call them as hypertonic. For example, mannitol, which is given in the cerebral edema patients. Mannitol, okay, mannitol, M-A-N-N, mannitol, okay, mannitol. So this is hypertonic. Okay, any solution which is having lesser osmolarity than the plasma, we call it as hypotonic. For example, 0.6% of NaCl. Okay, if you are going to give to the patient, this is hypotonic. That means the osmolarity of this solution is less than the plasma. Whereas 0.9 NaCl is isotonic, whereas 0.6% is hypotonic. Why this is important, guys? Tell me. Why we should know about the tonicity? Anybody?
For fluid
Yeah,
installation.
for the
Dehydrate.
fluid management of the patients and for the our RBCs. Suppose you give a hypertonic solution to a normal person in your OPD. Suppose you give a hypertonic solution. Now what happens? There is a
RBCs.
there is effect on the RBCs. Now what will happen? The water content which is present inside the RBCs will move out into the solution.
Shrink.
And RBCs will shrink and our body will experience hypoxia. Even though the RBC count is normal, if you infuse hypertonic solution, the person will end up in hypoxia. Suppose if you give hypotonic solution to a normal person, what will happen to the RBCs?
Swell.
RBC will swell. Now what happens? The water will move from outside into the inside RBC, and RBC will lose its biconcave shape. It will swell, and at one point time it will rupture, and person will end up in hemolysis. So it is very important to know the tonicity of the fluid which you are going to give to the patients. So depending upon the condition, you need to select the fluids for patients. Okay, isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic. Did you follow this concept?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay? Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Next, coming to the non-ionic diffusion. So next mechanism for diffusion is non-ionic. Suppose there are some substances which are non-ionic. That means they cannot dissociate. They are in the undissociated form. They are in the undissociated. Which are the example for undissociated forms of the substances in our body? Major is proteins. Okay, proteins cannot dissociate. Proteins, okay, they cannot cross the cell membrane. Also, proteins, because they are large molecules, they cannot cross the membrane. Also, in this case, what is the behavior of the movement of the ions and the water molecule? Okay, now what happens? These undissociated molecules which cannot cross the cell membrane because they cannot dissociate, okay, there is a different mechanism. Okay, what happens? These molecules, they cross, okay, these molecules in the undissociated form, they diffuse from one side to the other side of the membrane, and then they dissociate. After crossing the membrane to the other side, then they will dissociate in the other side of the compartment. Okay, other side of the compartment. This is called as non-ionic diffusion. Did you understand, guys? Here, in one side of the cell membrane, they cannot dissociate. Therefore, they cross the membrane in undissociated form. After diffusion of it, then they will dissociate. And this mechanism is called as non-ionic diffusion. So this is applicable only for some of the weak acids and bases in our body. Some of the weak acids and bases, okay, mainly, and some proteins, okay, they cannot dissociate, okay, then they will cross and then dissociate, okay. So this is called as non-ionic diffusion. Next, coming to another concept called as Gibbs-Donon effect, okay, Donon effect. So we'll come to one more. So mainly proteins here, okay, mainly proteins, okay. When an ion on the one side of the membrane, okay, ion here, protein is also an ion here, okay. This when they cannot diffuse through a membrane. Now what will happen? So here these proteins cannot move. Okay. What happens is here your K plus and Cl minus, they will arrange in such a way that equilibrium is reached. Equilibrium is reached indirectly. Okay. So for example, now we take here, okay, the negative charges of a non-diffusible anion. So anion, so proteins and phosphates are majorly in the intracellular compartment. They are major. Okay, they are non-diffusible anions. They will hinder the diffusion of the diffusible cations and favor the diffusion of the diffusible anions. Okay, this negatively charged non-diffusible anion hinders the diffusion of the diffusible cations and favors the diffusion of the diffusible anions. Means here, since these protein molecules, these undissociated, okay, which cannot move, okay, which cannot move to the other side. Here, what happens is there is movement of the anions and cations, and then there is a equilibrium is reached. Equilibrium is reached. Okay. Now we will consider here one example. Okay. So here is the X compartment, and here is the Y compartment. Guys, please concentrate. I am explaining this with the help of the diagram that is given in your genome itself. Okay. On the X side, you have K plus ions, Cl minus ions, and proteins on the X side. Whereas on the Y side, you have only K and Cl minus. There is no other proteins or anything else. Okay. So you have got two compartments, X and Y. X contains K plus Cl minus proteins. Y contains K plus and Cl minus. Now what happens? The osmotically active substances here is different concentration and it is different concentration. Now equilibrium, there will be movement now to achieve the equilibrium. Okay. Now what will happen? To assume the concentration of anions on the and cations, okay, are equally, initially they are equal. Initially they are equal. Now what will happen? Because proteins are present here, the Cl diffuses down the concentration gradient from Y to X. And some of the K plus moves with the negatively charged chloride ions. Okay, chloride ions. So what I am telling is, guys, concentrate here. Again, I will come back here. See here, there are two membranes. There is a membrane. There are two compartments, X and Y. X and Y. Here, the compartment X and Y is impermeable to the charged proteins, but they are freely permeable to the K plus and Cl minus. Now, by looking into this diagram, which side negativity is more, guys? Tell me, X or Y? X, isn't it? Now, to maintain the electrical neutrality, what will happen now? K plus should move here, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So if K plus moves here, along with that, some of the Cl also should move, isn't it? That's what I'm telling you. See here. Now, see the sentences here. Here, what happens? The Cl diffuses its from Y to X. Okay. Along with that, even K plus also moves in the opposite direction. Now, what happens? The K plus concentration on the X side will become more because K plus is moving along with this. Okay. Now, what happens? Now, to assume the concentration, to make it equal, now there is movement of the ions. So, what happens? They ultimately end up in such a way that K plus ions on the X side will be more. Okay. Now, what happens? K plus Cl minus protein on the X side is more than the Y side. Okay. Now more osmotically particles are present on the X side. There are more osmotically active present on the X side, isn't it? Yes or no? In the diagram. Yes or no? Did you understand or know this concept? Are you following or no? Got to reply.
Sir, clear, sir.
Clear?
We
Yeah.
understood, sir.
Now what happens? Now if we just take this equation, okay, the K plus on the X side divided by K plus on the Y side should be equal to Cl minus on the Y side and Cl minus on the X side. If we take the ratios. Now if we just cross multiply, K plus and Cl minus on the X side should be equal to the K plus and Cl minus on the Y side. What happens actually is the protein is not able to move here. Okay, protein is not able to move here. Okay, but instead equilibrium, how they manage the fluid compartments, how they are managed is by movement of the K plus and Cl minus, so that there is the, to multiply K concentration and Cl concentration on the X side should be equal to the K concentration and Cl concentration. If you multiply, they should be equal. They distribute in such a way that they maintain this equality. Okay, so this Donnan and Gibbs, okay, these are the two scientists that showed that the presence of non-diffusible ion, the diffusible ions will distribute themselves in such a way that equilibrium of their concentration is ratios are equal. If you take the ratios here, okay, if you take the ratios on the either side, so the ratios are equal. So this was showed by these two scientists, and this is called as Gibbs-Donnan effect. So this was the question recently asked in the last AIMS. Okay, what was the question is, according to the Gibbs-Donnan effect, okay, Gibbs-Donnan effect, okay, or Gibbs-Donnan equation, which of the following is the particle that is responsible? The one of the answer was proteins. What is protein here actually? Protein is non-diffusible ion. Okay, non-diffusible ion. So you can expect a similar question in the coming exams also. According to the Gibbs-Donnan equation, which, because of which particle this Gibbs-Donnan effect is coming here? Because of which particle
Protein.
the Gibbs-Donnan effect is shown? Because of the non-diffusible
Non-diffusible
ion.
ion.
Which is the best example for non-diffusible ions in our body intracellularly that is present in the ICF compartment? It is mainly the proteins. It is mainly the proteins. So this was the recently asked question. A very tricky question. You should know this concept. That is, whenever there is a non-diffusible ion, the remaining ions which are diffusible like A plus, Na plus, Cl, okay, anything, any other ions which are diffusible, they will move in and out of the compartment and they maintain this ratio, and this is called as Gibbs-Donnan equation. And this is called as Gibbs-Donnan effect equation. And this Gibbs-Donnan effect is because of the non-diffusible ions. Non-diffusible ions. Okay. I think this much is enough for you. Okay, you understood the concept, isn't it? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So your Gibbs-Donnan effect has got major three effects in our body. So this also should know. So what are the three effects? So mainly because the proteins, okay, charged proteins in the cells, inside the cells, in ICF, okay, they are more osmotically active, okay, than the interstitial or the intracellular fluid, okay, intercellular fluid. And because animals, so now what happens if they are there inside, more osmotically active, if they are more inside the cell, by osmosis, what should happen? Actually, tell me. Now, you think normally inside the cell you have got more proteins, and these are non-diffusible. Okay. Now, if they are not going to move out, but they are osmotically more active, now water will move into the cell or out of the cell? Tell me. Suppose proteins are inside, they are osmotically very active. Now, osmosis will occur inside or outside? Water will come inside or no? Just think.
Sir.
Huh? Just now you answered in the hypotonic solution. Same thing. See, inside the cell you have got more osmotic elements. Water will move inside and cell will swell. Isn't it? Yes or no? Yes or no? Then eventually the cell will rupture. Cell will rupture. But normally our cells are not rupturing. Even though the proteins are inside, our cells never rupture because of the operation of the sodium-potassium pump. This is why the God has given sodium-potassium pump on the cell membrane, which are continuously pumping the osmotically active sodium out to outside. Isn't it? In the sodium-potassium pump, what is happening? You tell me. 3 sodium are pumped out for exchange of 2 potassium. Isn't it?
Potassium.
Yes. This cycle is going on in order to maintain the equilibrium so that the cell will not rupture. Okay. And at equilibrium, so in the equilibrium in our body, there is always an asymmetric distribution of the ions, and that is determined by the Nernst equation. We'll come to this in the next slide. What is Nernst equation? And because there is more proteins in the plasma, so if you take our plasma, there are plasma proteins are there. So if you compare the plasma with the interstitial fluid, there are more proteins in the plasma. Again, Donon effect is coming into play, and there is net movement of the ions across the capillary walls. So these are the important things that is happening in our body. This is inside the cell, this is inside the plasma and interstitial, and this is occurring across the all the cell membrane. Okay, there is a electrical gradient. Okay, there is an electrical gradient. Now we will come to one by one. What is Nernst equation? So if we take chloride, I'm taking chloride as an example, which is given in your canon. So Nernst equation here, the electrical potential for chloride is given. Okay, equilibrium potential, that is called as equilibrium potential for chloride is equal to RT divided by Fz log of chloride outside by chloride inside. Okay, R is the gas constant. R is the gas is absolute constant. Okay, that is the balance of the okay, balance. That is the balance. Okay, and ClO means concentration outside the cell. I means concentration inside the cell. Did you understand this Nernst equation? So once this was asked, okay, which of the following is the Nernst equation? Remember, it is RT divided by Z. R for gas constant, T for absolute temperature, F for Faraday constant, Z for balance. Log of chloride outside divided by chloride inside. Why it is outside here? Because it is more in the outside component. Okay. So this is giving the equilibrium potential. This is the equation for equilibrium potential for chloride. Equilibrium for chloride. Okay. Here, since these are constant, okay, here it is derived. Okay, 61 point. And here it is log is converted to log of the base 10. So that is chloride outside, chloride inside. Chloride. Hello.
ಸರ್ ಒಂದ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಬರ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್. ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್
Hello.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಸರ್ ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ. Yes sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Students, are you following?
Audible sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Equilibrium potential for chloride ion. In the similar way, you have got equilibrium potential for sodium, equilibrium potential for potassium, all those things. Okay. Here, by converting into the log to the base 10 and at a temperature of 37, okay, you have got the value. Okay, you have got the value for the equilibrium potential for the chloride. Did you understand this equation, guys? Nernst equation, RT divided by Fz, log of chloride outside by inside. So this once it was asked. Okay, once this question was asked, which of the following is the Nernst equation? So RT divided by F. Either it can be this or it can be this. So if you are converting log to the base 10, it is plus or minus 61.5 log of that ion inside divided by that ion outside. Concentration inside divided by concentration outside. Okay. Once this question was asked, Nernst equation. Either this is the Nernst equation or this is the modified one, taking all these values. So if we take these all values, the normal values, it will come 61.5. Okay, 61.5. Okay, 61.5. Now, if we take a mammalian spinal neuron, if we take the inside concentration and outside concentration, you apply the Nernst equation. So for sodium, it is plus 60 millivolt. For sodium, it is plus 60 millivolt. For chloride, minus 70 millivolt. For potassium, it is minus 90 millivolt. So these all the three values have been once asked, okay, in DNP exams. Okay, so this is the again most common repeating questions. Okay, by Nernst equation, what is the equilibrium potential for sodium? Now tell me what is the equilibrium potential for sodium, guys? How much for sodium equilibrium potential? Plus 60 millivolts. Units is very important, guys. They will confuse with the units. Millivolts. For chloride, minus 70 millivolts.
Minus 70.
For potassium, minus 90 millivolts.
Minus
Okay,
90.
so this is very
70
important
millivolts.
from the. So these are all memory-based questions. So you need to remember all these values. Okay, only potassium has one positive value, other two are having negative value. Okay. Now coming to the primary active transport, the sodium potassium pump, which I told now just now. Okay, so it is having two units. One is the alpha subunit, and other is the beta subunit. Okay, and it has got binding site for okay, and on the outside the cell, extracellular side is the intracellular side. In the intracellular side, sodium attaching point, okay, binding point. Outside it is potassium. Here it is sodium, here it is potassium, and one more obane is the inhibitor of the pump. Okay, obane, one chemical compound. Okay, it is present in our body. Obane. Okay, here energy is derived from the breakdown of the ATP. Okay, it is a ion pump. This is the ion pump. Okay, example is sodium potassium pump, calcium pump, and hydrogen potassium ATPase pump. All these are using ATP as the energy source. Okay, energy pump. So it has got a alpha subunit and a beta subunit. Alpha subunit is the main catalytic subunit. Main catalytic subunit is the alpha, because here it is having the binding site for various compounds here. Okay, various compounds here. Okay, binding for sodium. So your alpha, which is the catalytic unit, has got a binding site for sodium, ATP, and phosphate. Okay, there is a ATPase activity, and in the extracellular side, it is having binding site for potassium and obane. Potassium and obane. So remember, once this question was asked, okay, among these four, which is the main catalytic unit, subunit. So this is the alpha subunit of the sodium potassium pump, which is important because it is having the binding site for various ions here, ATP and other things. Okay, so this is sodium potassium pump. Then what is the function of a sodium potassium pump? What is its importance? Okay, coming to the functions, it is mainly important for maintaining the composition of the ions and the cell volume. Okay, maintains the cell volume and the composition. So just now we discussed intracellularly you have got more proteins. If there are more proteins, they are more automatically active. Cell should swell and rupture, but that doesn't happen. Why? Because of the presence of the sodium potassium ATPase pump. That is the one which is important in maintaining volume as well as the composition. Okay, it prevents the accumulation of sodium inside. Okay, so by maintaining the composition of various ions, the cell volume and the composition is maintained. It is an electrogenic pump. Okay, electrogenic pump means 3 sodium ions are pumped outside. So net effect, what is it is creating negativity inside or not? By pumping 3 sodium outside for exchange of 2 potassium inside. So net effect is it is creating a negativity inside. Okay, it is meant, so that is negativity inside. That is nothing but the resting membrane potential. So resting membrane potential means always inside the cell it is negative, and that is because of the operation of your sodium potassium pump. Okay, it always maintains the resting membrane potential. Now I will ask one question. What is the resting membrane potential of skeletal muscles? Can you tell me? What is the resting membrane potential of skeletal muscles? How much? What is the resting membrane potential in nerve? One nerve? So, guys, we will take all these in coming classes. So, resting membrane potential in case of skeletal muscles is minus 90 millivolts. The resting membrane potential in case of nerve it is minus 70 millivolts. Okay? And your sodium potassium pump is regulated by, yeah. So, your sodium potassium pump, that is increased, the activity is increased by presence of some hormones like thyroid hormone, insulin. Okay? It is low pain, low temperature, hypoxia, digitalis. If these things are there, your sodium potassium pump is inhibited. And your activity of the sodium potassium pump is activated by the presence of thyroid hormones, insulin, some of the hormones. So this is how it is regulated in our body. Okay. Coming to the secondary active transport. That was the primary active transport. So potassium pump is explained in detail now. It is an example for primary active transport because here directly the same pump is using the ATP and it is transporting the ions inside and outside. So this is called as primary active transport. As primary active transport. Now coming to the concept of secondary active transport. Here what is happening is a solute is getting transported. The solute is getting transported against the concentration gradient. Against this concentration gradient using the energy generated by another solute. Another solute is using the energy and creating a gradient, and here the primary solute is getting transported. I will explain you with one example. You will understand it very easily. So energy is derived secondarily from the energy which has been stored in the form of ionic concentration difference between the two sides of the membrane. And here this primary solute is coupled with the sodium transport, and the sodium gradient is maintained by the help of the primary active transporter, the sodium potassium pump. Okay, now I'll explain you the example. Take this example in the renal cell. Okay, this is the tubular side, lumen, and this is the interstitial side. Okay, and this is the renal cell. Okay, this is the renal cell. Now what is happening is your sodium, glucose, amino acids all are getting filtered at the glomerulus. Okay, all are getting filtered at the glomerulus. But the body will not excrete all of these things outside. Instead, the body will try to conserve this. How this is operating? How this is operating? So, at the basolateral membrane, that is the interstitial side, so you have got the sodium potassium ATPase pump here. Okay, sodium potassium ATPase pump is present in the basolateral membrane. What is happening is here, with the help of ATP, 3 sodium are pumped into the interstitial fluid that ultimately going into the blood vessels. This is the blood vessel, and 2 potassium ions are coming here. So when the 2 ions are coming here, positively charged, and 3 ions are going outside, what is created here? Negativity or positivity here inside the cell?
Negativity.
Negativity, isn't it? So this negativity has to be neutralized by one more positive ion, isn't it? So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that is maintained by absorption of sodium here from the lumen. Did you understand? The ionic gradient. The ionic gradient is created by what? It is created by a active transport mechanism which is present in the basolateral membrane. So negativity, electrical negativity is created by a ATPase pump which is acting in the basolateral membrane, and this negative force is driving the solutes to get absorbed from the lumen. So this is a symport. So along with sodium, glucose is coming. This is an example for symport. You have learned that, isn't it? Symport. So along with sodium, even amino acids are also absorbed. So this is also an example for symport. Are you getting this, guys? This is
Yes, sir.
the transport of the sodium. This transport of the sodium is called as secondary active transport. And this reabsorption of sodium is called as secondary active. This is actively reabsorbed. How actively? Because by the usage of ATP in the basolateral membrane indirectly. So this is an example for secondary active transport. Did you understand, guys, the secondary active transport? Did you follow this?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I think now the concept is clear. Okay. Here the primary solute is going against the with the help of usage of sodium potassium ATPase sodium potassium ATPase. Next, coming to vesicular transport. Now we have completed the passive transport, that is diffusion and osmosis, and we completed active transport, primary active transport and secondary active transport. Next, coming to another form of transport, that is called as vesicular transport. Vesicular transport here because there are some macromolecules such as proteins, amino acids, sugars, waste products of metabolism, some hormones, neurotransmitters. These cannot be transported with the help of carrier proteins. Therefore, they need a different medium for their transport, that is called as vesicular transport, either by endocytosis or exocytosis or transcytosis. Now we will see one by one what are these type of the vesicular transport. Okay. So you can see here, these are the macromolecules which are forming a imagination here. Okay, this is for exocytosis. First I will explain exocytosis. So the neurotransmitters and some hormones are synthesized. They are stored in the form of vesicles. When these vesicles they want to send these neurotransmitters or the hormones outside, they come and bind with the cell membrane, and ultimately they break up here and the neurotransmitters are sent outside. This is called as exocytosis. So form of vesicles they come and fuse, and then the macromolecules are thrown out of the cell. So this is called as exocytosis. And what is endocytosis? Whenever the cell wants to take up the amino acids or the sugars or the proteins inside, they come and bind here, and there is an invagination of the cell membrane, and there is fusion of the and pinch off. The macromolecules come and bind, there is an invagination of cell membrane, and finally it will fold into the vesicle, and vesicle get pinched off. So this is called as endocytosis. Okay, so endocytosis. So again, in the endocytosis we have got different. Pinocytosis means cell drinking. Along with the molecules, there is some water molecule here. Okay, cell drinking. Phagocytosis. You know, in case of neutrophils and other WBCs, phagocytosis, that is called as cell eating. So whenever there is a bacteria, okay, whenever there is a bacteria, it is engulfed. That is called as cell eating. Okay, that is called as cell eating. And there is one more type of endocytosis, that is called as receptor mediated endocytosis. That means there are some macromolecules, they have got a receptor. Whenever the receptor, particular receptor is present, then only that molecule will come and bind and it is taken into a cell. That is called as receptor mediated endocytosis. Now we will come to the mechanism of endocytosis. So there are two types of mechanisms in the endocytosis. So whatever you saw in this diagram, so whatever you saw here, this is called as constitutive pathway. So the macromolecules will come and attach to the cell membrane. There is a formation of vesicle and pinch off. That is the constitutive. One more is called as Clathrin mediated. So image based question. Image based. So what is this image? This is the Clathrin. So this image is, so they can give you this image and tell what is this. So this is the Clathrin molecule. Okay, Clathrin molecule is having a shape of triskelion. This is an animal. Okay, having 3 legs. Having 3 legs. So there are 3 legs. So this is center point. So 1 leg, 2 leg, and 3 leg. Okay, it's a triskelion having 3 legs radiating from the central. Okay, what happens is this is a type of a molecule which is present in the underneath of the cell membrane. So if this is the cell membrane, this is present underneath. Whenever this clathrin is there, the substance will come and attach, and then there is endocytosis. Okay, at the neck of the vesicle, there is a GTP binding protein called as dynamin. Okay, dynamin, and there is pinching of the vesicle. What happens is the molecule comes and attaches here to the clathrin molecule. Okay, clathrin is underneath the cell membrane. Then there is formation of the endocytic vesicle, and at the neck of this there is a GTP. Okay, GTP dynamin. Then there is the endocytosis of the substance. So this is called as clathrin mediated. So remember, clathrin is having a shape of, this is nothing but a molecule which is present beneath the cell membrane. Okay, and at the neck of the vesicle there is a GTP binding protein called as dynamin. Okay, then there is pinching of the vesicle. Okay, then there is recycling of this clathrin occurs. So this clathrin again, these molecules again come back to the cytoplasm and help in the endocytosis of next molecules. Okay, so two mechanisms for endocytosis: constitutive, clathrin. So this is the clathrin molecule. Okay, clathrin having a 3 legs. Okay, image based question. This can be a potential question for you. Okay, clathrin. Did you follow, guys? Have you understood?
Yes, sir.
This will end the transport mechanisms. This will end the transport mechanisms. So, endocytosis, constitutive pathway, and clathrin mediated pathway. Okay, clathrin is a molecule which is present beneath the cell membrane. It is having 3 legs. Okay, so that is one helping in the making up of the vesicle. That is clathrin mediated endocytosis. Mainly the low density lipoproteins and other things are transported in this way. Okay, in this way. That is nerve growth factors and low density lipoproteins are transported by clathrin mediated endocytosis. Okay. Any doubts, guys? Any doubts?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No? Okay. Shall we wind up the class?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Ramesh?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello, sir. Dr. Blue, sir.
Ah,
It was
sir.
nice class, sir.
Yeah, yeah, sir.
Yes, sir.
I almost
can
one
discuss with students, ask their doubts.
Yeah.
Students, if you got any doubts, so discuss with sir now.
No, sir.
No doubts. Radhika?
Was it lengthy?
Sir, yes, sir.
They are happy.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Manasa
Because
Ratu?
Yes, sir.
these are very basic.
No, sir.
Suchit Bhatt?
Yes, sir.
If you want to ask any doubts to the class, sir, you can ask. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
tell
sir.
me.
If you have no doubts, that is okay. Then read. 7 o'clock, there is a surgery class. Attend. Huh?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Huh?
Yeah. Okay, sir.